So earlier this week, Moderna revealed its experimental vaccine for COVID-19 is 94.5% effective in preventing the virus. Another pharmaceutical giant, Pfizer, also announced that its vaccine was around 90% effective. So more than 50 million people worldwide have been infected with the virus. But who will get the vaccine first? Let's discuss this with Professor Shabir Madhi from Wits University. Prof, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. So this week we've been dealing with the good news, the progress on these two vaccines, but as things stand, the world's richest have already ordered in advance. Should they succeed, where does it leave countries such as South Africa that don't have as deep a purse?
So good evening to you. And I think you struck the nail on the head in that much of the vaccine that will be produced by both Moderna as well as Pfizer for the first 6 months of next year, in a sense, it's already bespoken for. These are advanced purchases, which many of the high-income countries, including the United States, United Kingdom, many other countries in the European Union, as well as India, have already made. So it's going to be difficult to access vaccine in the immediate future. And I think our best hope of being able to get vaccine by the second quarter of next year is if some of the other vaccines come through as well and show protection against COVID-19.
Why haven't we seen a large pre-purchase from the likes of South Africa and the other countries on the continent in particular?
Yeah, so I think what you're facing is sort of a competition in terms of purchasing power. As an example, for the Pfizer vaccine, the United States paid $1.9 billion to procure 100 million doses of vaccine, which is roughly about $20 per dose. For the Moderna vaccine, in fact, the actual funding of the studies related to that vaccine is completely funded by the United States. So as part of those agreements, in terms of the funding of the development of the vaccine, the United States has actually decided that it wants first rights in terms of accessing vaccines, that it's funding for development, and which will be produced in the United States. And the situation is not too different to India, where they'll be manufacturing some vaccines that are being developed by other companies. But even those vaccines that will initially be produced in India, manufactured in India, at least 50% of those vaccines are committed to being used in India.
And just to break it down, Moderna had reportedly said in August that it would charge between $32 and $37 per dose. Pfizer had said it would reportedly charge around $20 per dose. Those aren't the most affordable prices for countries that are already battling with the economic impact of COVID-19. Many on the continent were poor before the pandemic. So where do they look to for help, I wonder?
So the only option which provides some sort of realistic chances of being able to gain vaccine for many low-income countries is through the COVAX facility. So that's an initiative that's led by different groups, including the World Health Organization, which is trying to get countries to sort of pool their money so they can actually become much more competitive in terms of negotiating with companies, as well as in terms of the volume of vaccine that they would be able to get eventually. Unfortunately for South Africa, which has indicated that it wants to access the COVAX facility, because it is considered to be an upper middle income country, the expectations of South Africa would be that it would probably need to pay the full price at which vaccine will be able to be procured by the COVAX facility. And that is to cross-subsidize very low-income countries that simply wouldn't even be able to afford $1 or $2 per dose.
And Prof, when you look at, you look at AstraZeneca and the Oxford trial, there's the Moderna vaccine, which we're getting good news from. There's Pfizer as well. I know the Pfizer vaccine in particular, there was a lot of chat this week about just the specifications as far as storage of the vaccine itself, and how that may leave some countries out that don't necessarily have the necessary infrastructure. I'm wondering then if we'll end up with a situation where perhaps each continent, each region of the world may have to look to a specific thing depending on the specifications for the vaccine storage and the other technicalities, if we can call them that.
Correct. So the cold storage of these vaccines is a challenge for the Pfizer vaccine, at least in its current formulation. It needs to be kept at ultra-low temperatures, minus 70 degrees Celsius. And in most low-income countries, including in South Africa, there's very few places that actually have got those sort of capabilities. In South Africa, the only places where you have these minus 70-degree freezers is at specialized laboratories, which certainly doesn't lend itself to mass deployment of the vaccine. Fortunately for the Moderna vaccine, it remains at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius for at least about 30 days. So it is something that is much more feasible to deploy. But as you mentioned, the AstraZeneca vaccine and some of the other vaccines that will hopefully come online in the next few weeks, if not sooner, will probably only need to be stored again at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. And the ability to scale up production of some of these other vaccines is much easier than the ability to scale up production of these messenger RNA vaccines which Pfizer and Moderna have developed.
Professor Shabir Madhi, always good to speak to you, Doctor. Professor Madhi is with the Wits University here in Johannesburg.